this Monday night, the International Criminal Court wants leaders of both Israel and Hamas arrested. The reason?
There should be no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. None.
The ramifications and the reaction. Iran's president and foreign minister confirmed killed in a chopper crash. The potential impact of their deaths. Tragedy at an Ontario lake. The investigation into a deadly boat collision and what witnesses heard. Plus, one man's giant leap delayed by decades.
I was going to be the first black astronaut.
Why it took more than 60 years for him to reach space, and the record he just shattered.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with an unprecedented move by the world's top criminal court. For the first time, the International Criminal Court is targeting the top leader of a close ally of the United States. The chief prosecutor is seeking arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his defense minister, and 3 Hamas leaders. The filings claim Netanyahu and Defense Minister Yoav Gallant bear responsibility for multiple war crimes and crimes against humanity. That includes the suspected starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, allegations of intentionally directing attacks against civilians, persecution, and extermination. The arrest warrants against Hamas accuse the group's leader, Yahya Sinwar, and 2 others of murder and torture, taking hostages, rape, and other acts of sexual violence, and outrages upon personal dignity. The move is a harsh rebuke of Israel's war strategy, and it further scrutinizes Hamas's October attack on Israel. In our top story, Jackson Proskow reports on what difference it could make.
The horrors of the 7-month-old conflict are fueling allegations that both sides have committed war crimes.
International law and the laws of armed conflict apply to everyone.
Prosecutors at the International Criminal Court requested arrest warrants for 3 senior Hamas leaders for their alleged roles in the October 7th attacks, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister are named because of their response, with the ICC alleging crimes including starvation that continue to this day.
Israel, like all states, has the right to defend its population. Those rights, however, do not absolve Israel of its obligations to comply with international humanitarian law.
Some international law experts applauded the decision.
No matter what, whether these arrest warrants are enforced, they clearly say that some very serious crimes are likely occurring and that must stop.
In the conflict, neither side is happy.
The prosecutor's absurd charges against me and Israel's defense minister are merely an attempt to deny Israel the basic right of self-defense.
While the Palestine Liberation Organization accused the ICC of a double standard. In a statement, U.S. President Joe Biden called the decision outrageous and pledged to stand with Israel.
This decision does nothing to help and could jeopardize ongoing efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement that would get hostages out of Gaza and surge humanitarian assistance in.
Neither Israel nor the U.S. recognize the authority of the court. More than 120 other countries, including Great Britain and Germany, do. If the ICC ultimately authorizes the warrants, it could at the very least make life difficult for the accused.
Those named in the warrants will either have to surrender or be surrendered to the court, or they'll have to be careful where they travel.
The ICC will not be able to stop the bloodshed. The court previously issued an arrest warrant for Russian President Vladimir Putin for the war in Ukraine to no effect. Still, the investigation and the international scrutiny are signs that the horrors of the conflict have not gone unchecked. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
As Jackson mentioned, there are more concerns for civilian casualties in Gaza today as fighting between Israel and Hamas re-intensified in the north, including at the Jabalia refugee camp. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says there have been more than 100 Palestinian deaths since yesterday. That includes casualties from overnight strikes in the south in Rafah, despite warnings from the U.S. to back down from its impending attack. Israel's defense minister says the country is committed to broadening the ground operation there. Between 300,000 and 400,000 refugees remain in Rafah. The bodies of Iran's president and foreign minister have been recovered from a helicopter crash site in a mountainous region. A massive search was launched after the helicopter they were in failed to return from a meeting near Azerbaijan. 5 days of national mourning are underway in Iran. But as Crystal Goomansingh reports, outside the country, there have been celebrations.
Close-up images of twisted metal were broadcast on Iran state TV following the discovery of a helicopter in the mountainous region of northwestern Iran. Despite difficult terrain and foggy conditions, several bodies were recovered, including the president's 63-year-old Ebrahim Raisi, along with Foreign Minister Hossein Amirabdollahian. Turkey's president saying, "I wish God's mercy to the late Raisi and the Iranian foreign minister and other officials who lost their lives in the accident." But not everyone is mournful. The National Council of Resistance of Iran celebrated with dozens of members outside the Iranian embassy in Berlin.
I am very happy today because we want to bring freedom and democracy for Iran.
Accomplishing that is a lofty goal. Iran is scheduled to hold its presidential elections June 28th, but who will appear on the ballot will be determined by the supreme leader and his office, says this political scientist.
It will be probably very much along the lines of the last elections, which were narrowed enough to guarantee that whoever is elected maintains a certain continuity.
Security, he notes, is a priority. It was just last month that Iran launched its first ever direct attack on Israel. We don't know why the chopper carrying the president and 7 others crashed, killing all on board. The 2 other choppers in the convoy returned safely.
I'm not shy to say that when I heard the news, immediately I thought, that's very strange.
The U.S. Secretary of Defense was asked about the crash.
The United States had no part to play in that crash, and that's a fact, plain and simple.
A national period of mourning is underway in Iran, and the vice president has taken over government operations. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange won a significant legal victory today. A British court ruled he can appeal against extradition to the United States on espionage charges. Hundreds of supporters cheered as the ruling was handed down. Assange has been held in a London prison since 2019. He faces charges in the United States over his website's publication of a trove of classified documents almost 15 years ago. Assange wasn't in the court to hear the decision because of an undisclosed health reason. His wife spoke outside the court saying the U.S. should drop the case.
As a family, we're relieved. But how long can this go on? This case is shameful, and it is taking an enormous toll on Julian.
Assange's lawyer says he could face 175 years in prison if convicted, though American authorities have said any sentence would likely be much shorter than that. An inquiry is slamming Britain for infecting thousands of people with tainted blood and covering it up. The probe found British authorities and the country's public health service knowingly exposed patients to deadly infections and hid the truth for decades. Today, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak apologized to the victims and their families and called it a day of shame.
And the result of this inquiry should shake our nation to its core. This should have been avoided. It was known these treatments were contaminated. Warnings were ignored repeatedly. Time and again, people in positions of power and trust had the chance to stop the transmission of those infections.
An estimated 3,000 people are believed to have died in the UK, and 30,000 people were infected after receiving blood or blood products tainted with HIV or hepatitis between the 1970s and 1990s. Crews in Baltimore have refloated the cargo ship that destroyed the Francis Scott Key Bridge in March. Beginning before dawn, several tugboats pulled the ship back to a nearby terminal. The Dali had been stuck under tons of wreckage after it slammed into a bridge pillar, causing it all to collapse. 6 construction workers were killed. Officials hope to fully reopen the shipping channel by the end of the month. We're learning much more tonight about a horrific boat crash near Kingston, Ontario, that claimed the lives of 3 young adults and left 5 other people injured. It happened around nightfall on Saturday. 2 boats collided on picturesque Bob's Lake in an area known as Bucks Bay. Global's Sean O'Shea traveled there today and learned more about what happened.
For cottage owners and anyone who loves a lake, the May long weekend holds a special place in a Canadian calendar. But on Bob's Lake, north of Kingston, Ontario, the first unofficial long weekend of summer is being marked in the worst possible way, after these 2 small boats collided and 3 people died.
I heard a smash, and then I yelled out to see, is everybody all right?
Paul Hogan lives on the water nearby. So does Bob Main.
We heard a loud crash, incredibly loud crash.
It happened around 9:30 Saturday evening. Neighbors say it was dark. There was no moonlight at the time. The 2 boats are sandwiched together. This fiberglass speedboat named Why Wouldn't Ya appeared to strike a metal fishing boat from behind.
That speedboat it's been known to be driving fairly quickly.
The boat's owner had just posted on Facebook, writing he was looking forward to the first rip of the season tomorrow. As for speed, the boat owner wrote, "It's time to put the effing hammer down."
That boat is an incredibly fast boat. I did not know the owner. I know the boat. Everybody knows that boat.
The speed limit in this part of the lake is 10 kilometers per hour. Signs read dead slow, no wake, and be nice, go slow. Lake residents say everyone operating a vessel here knows the rules or should. But like vehicles on highways, limits are often ignored.
He will come out here and just open it up, and it goes from like 0 to 60 in seconds. It's that powerful.
Both boats were towed in and taken away for examination. In addition to the 3 people who died, 5 people on the boats were hospitalized with injuries.
This collision the subject of a provincial police investigation. No charges have been laid yet. This a reminder to boaters about the risks on the water in the summer. Farah.
Sean O'Shea in Bob's Lake, Ontario. Thank you, Sean. The federal government is launching what it calls a national action plan to combat auto theft. The plan includes tougher penalties for thieves and improved information sharing between governments, police, and customs officials. It also aims to make improvements to allow more shipping containers to be examined before they leave the country.
One of the most efficient ways, again, based on this intelligence information, may be to have a CBSA officer actually open the back of a container. Open quickly, look in the container, and then close it. But it's about deploying those resources, and that's exactly what we're doing, including hiring more officers.
New data from the Insurance Bureau of Canada shows insurance claims for stolen vehicles skyrocketed to a record $1.5 billion in 2023. Turning the tables on scammers. Coming up, what happened when one man who was preyed on decided to play along? Red Lobster has filed for bankruptcy protection. The American restaurant chain filed in a Florida court after securing $136 million in financing commitments from its lenders. Red Lobster says its restaurants will remain open and operate as usual during the bankruptcy proceedings. However, it plans to reduce its locations and pursue a sale of its assets. Red Lobster has about 700 locations around the world, including more than 25 in Canada. Many of us know someone who's fallen victim to a phone scam, but it's increasingly getting harder to detect fraud because of the rise of artificial intelligence. A Calgary senior recently got a phone call from someone posing as his nephew asking for money to get out of jail. Tomasia De Silva reports on how the scammer got busted.
The call came out of nowhere.
Hello? Hi. Do you know who this is? Do you not know me, Uncle Mike?
The caller said he was Michael O'Reilly's nephew, Patrick. He'd been in a car crash.
I broke my nose. That's probably why you don't recognize the voice.
And needed money to get out of jail.
I just have to pay $6,000 and get released, so I was just calling to see if you could help me out in any way.
What about Tom?
Tom is the real Patrick's father, something the scammer didn't seem to know.
I thought Tom would help you along. Hello? Hello? Do you not have Tom's number? You should know your dad's number off by heart, for sake. What's wrong with you?
The jig was definitely up, and the scammer hung up.
He was very convincing. he was very convincing. I did know it was a scam, so I just sort of played him along.
Unfortunately, many don't catch on. Calgary police have received 32 reports of seniors losing money since the start of 2024. The total amount defrauded, $180K.
Voice mimicking technologies come a long way.
Cybersecurity experts say the rise of technology has led to a rise in fraud, and things like Chat, GPT, and AI can increasingly mimic voices and speech.
Try to find some way to verify before you actually take an action that could come back to bite you. So even if you're convinced you're talking to your nephew and he really needs help, insisting on calling him back at his normal phone number. If you're talking to a scammer who's impersonating him, they won't be able to answer his phone.
If all fails, ask specific, not leading questions.
If you start trying to ask for more and more details, that is one place where AI starts to show itself.
Right, that's terrible.
The scammer showed himself pretty early on to Michael O'Reilly. He didn't get any money out of him, just a few chuckles. Tomasio da Silva, Global News.
Warnings of a potential massacre ahead, the pleas for world leaders to address the crisis in Sudan. Canada and the international community are being warned by a group of legal experts and analysts about the possibility of an imminent massacre in Sudan. The crowded city of El Fasher in the Darfur region is nearly surrounded by a paramilitary group accused of large-scale, ethnically motivated atrocities during the country's year-long civil war. And as Redmond Shannon reports, time is running short for world leaders to take action.
Those who escape catastrophic hunger in Sudan's war often instead face the threat of mass murder and sexual violence. A panel of United Nations experts says there was an ethnically motivated massacre against non-Arab groups in Darfur last year. They said more than 10,000 were killed when the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, captured the city of El Geneina. A Canadian human rights non-governmental organisation recently led an analysis of these attacks.
We came to the clear, definitive legal conclusions that the RSF is committing genocide in Darfur.
It echoes the Darfur atrocities of 2 decades ago, and there are fears the worst is yet to come in the larger city of El Fasher. It is almost surrounded by the RSF. Satellite images in recent days show the apparent burning of homes in its outer neighbourhoods.
What this means is that we're actually able to see in real time how this might unfold, and this provides the international community with an opportunity to engage before it happens.
Sudanese analyst Khulud Khair says the re-establishment of an international peacekeeping force for Sudan is crucial. But that takes time and political will. She says any efforts for peace talks must engage with the United Arab Emirates and Russia over their alleged involvement in the war. Canada recently issued sanctions against Sudanese entities. Global Affairs Canada told Global News it is exploring all options to ensure those responsible for human rights violations are held to account.
But none have really articulated well exactly what that looks like and exactly what those consequences will mean for the different actors at different levels.
The International Criminal Court is investigating possible war crimes in Darfur, a process that also takes time. In the interim, the world is watching from above as the battle for El Fasher ploughs ahead. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
A lifelong dream finally realized for an historic astronaut. A man once poised to become America's first black astronaut has made it to space for the first time 60 years later. Ed Dwight rocketed beyond the Earth's atmosphere on board the Blue Origin, run by billionaire Jeff Bezos. Dwight also hit a new milestone, edging out a notable Canadian. Heidi Petracek on the significance of his trip to space and back.
It's likely 90-year-old Ed Dwight's feet still haven't touched the ground, even after his commercial space flight landed back on Earth Sunday.
I thought I really didn't need this in my life, but now I need it in my life.
Dwight was among the crew of 6 launched into space on Blue Origin's autonomous suborbital rocket system. The rocket reached 347,000 feet, the 11-minute flight, enough to finally make Dwight an astronaut.
I was going to be the first black astronaut. I completed astronaut training.
A U.S. Air Force captain, Dwight was recommended for the NASA Astronaut Corps in 1963, but wasn't selected. So he left the service, citing racial politics, and went on to become a celebrated sculptor. The goal of reaching space abandoned until now.
For self-satisfaction, yes, but more importantly, to satisfy all the wonderful people that have showered me with love.
Ed Dwight's call sign yesterday was justice. And when he landed and he called in that he was doing all right, he said, this is call sign justice, and justice is served.
Dwight also set a new record for the oldest person to ever reach space.
Oh, wow.
The previous record holder, Canadian actor and sci-fi icon William Shatner, was nearly 2 months younger when he took the trip more than 2 years ago.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Blue Origin doesn't publish its pricing, but word is tickets run upwards of $250,000 US. American nonprofit Space for Humanity, which advocates for access to space for all, pitched in for Dwight's seat, knowing it would make an impact.
We need folks to be inspired and believe that they can make it, just like Ed did yesterday.
After he landed, Dwight called the experience life-changing. The dream once pushed aside, fulfilled 60 years later. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
That smile says everything. And that's Global National for this Monday night. I'm Farah Nasser. On behalf of our whole crew, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is this view of Ingonish Island, Nova Scotia. We love seeing Your Canada, so email us your photos at viewers@globalnational.com. Donna will be back with you tomorrow. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.